Making a Stuart model steam plant part 88. After a long gap in the series, this episode shows me wiring the lamps to the dynamo. I'm doing this in a different way than I showed originally in a previous episode. The question is, why has there been such a long gap between the previous episode and this one? Well, I don't know really. Originally, I quoted a price for building a steam plant using components supplied by the customer. But very soon the job developed into something completely different, including fitting reversing gear to a Stuart 10V. The customer in the USA then said he was going to send me the contents of his workshop because he realised he was not cut out for this sort of thing. Several packages arrived over a period. Each package contained various items, many of which were damaged in transit. It seemed okay at the time, and I had various communications with the customer in the USA, including video calls using FaceTime. Everything was seeming to go okay. Then to my surprise an email arrived which said he was going to send me a steam plant as a gift for me to rebuild. That arrived in a couple of packages in due course, and once again there was damage present. And for a reason that is inexplicable to me, I've got to a point where face calls are not picked up by the customer in the USA and emails are few and far between. The big problem really is with import duty when I send these parts back to him. Anyway, cutting a long story short, I'm back on the job. These clips of me mounting the dynamo on the baseboard were taken quite a long time ago. Now to bring it up to date, I'm working on the plant once again. I've made a leather belt for the S50 to drive the dynamo, and that's okay apart from a ticking noise coming from the S50 that I will look at. The Stuart 10V runs very well, and the whistle works. And here I'm running the plant on compressed air. This plant is 99% complete. I just need to wire the lights, that's all that's wrong with it. Although I will look at the ticking noise on the S50 as a separate video. Here's the original S50 sent to me by the customer before I rebuilt it and repainted it. And as you can see, after the rebuild, it ran very sweetly. At the moment I think maybe something's come loose. Probably the piston, I don't know, but I will look at that shortly. It's a very quick job. Nothing's happened since the previous video to this one, except now it makes a knocking noise. In this video I'm going to deal with wiring the dynamo. These are the two lights, one at each side, and I've fitted them with warm white 6V LED bulbs. I've taken off the chimney because I need to tip the plant up on its end to work on the underside. I bought a small Proxon router which allowed me to route a slot in the underside of the board. This is between the two central points of the lights. In this clip I'm using my Bosch electric drill, which is capable of running very slowly, to wind red and black wires into one complete continuous length. This Bosch drill runs far more slowly than my Proxon motor tool, and it winds the two wires together into one very smoothly. Previously, I showed the mark that I made on the baseboard for the position of the wire to go through the board from the generator, and here is the hole that I drilled. I'm not going to show much of this, but I will show the guide that holds the Proxon motor tool and converts it into a router. This allows me quite easily to accurately route a slot in the baseboard to match the other one. I also need to enlarge the hole that goes through the baseboard so I can fit a piece of silicone rubber tubing to stop any vibration damaging the wiring. And here I'm doing just that, first of all using a 3/16 of an inch diameter twist drill. Later on in the job I enlarged this hole slightly to take some commercial silicone rubber fuel tubing. After blowing away the debris, it's wiring time. Question is, do I do it this way? I've twisted the wires for a second time, and here I've pushed the 4 wires up the hole so they line up with the generator. After a bit of thought, I didn't do it this way, I wired it differently. Both of the lights are going to be wired in parallel, but I'm using a long length of wire in the large slot underneath, and also a shorter length of wire from the dynamo, which I will terminate and connect to the lamps using connectors. But to make it easier for the customer to assemble the plant, I'm not going to use this type of connector. I'll show you what I'm going to use shortly. My old British Telecom test meter has finally stopped working after many years, the meter only goes up to 8, which is no good at all. I might have a look at this because an old Avo meter that I had did the same thing, and it turned out that a spider had got into the meter and spun a web around the mechanism. In the meantime, I've bought this. It is of course a digital multimeter. I only need it to tell me what the polarity of the dynamo is. I need to find out what this meter does when it sees a reverse polarity. To do this, I'm using a 1.5 volt dry cell battery. When a reversal leads negative to positive and vice versa, a small rectangle appears on the screen. And this is how this digital test meter shows reverse polarity. I think I prefer the analog meter going backwards, but anyway, on with the job. The positive terminal is at the top of the dynamo, so now it's time to plug in my soldering iron and wet the piece of sponge in the bottom of the soldering iron holder. This allows the tip of the soldering iron to be kept clean at all times. In this episode, I'm only going to show the soldering of the wires to the dynamo. What you're supposed to do is twist these wires together, tin them, then push them through the holes in the terminals on the dynamo and secure the wires with 2 bolts. When I was working on the other steam plant with an identical dynamo, I didn't find this to be a very good method. Repeatedly, the actual bolts that hold the wires in place would fracture the wires. So on this steam plant I'm going to directly solder the wires onto the terminals, which should give me a far more secure connection. I'd like to mention at this stage that I am using a 25 watt iron. This is ideal because it solders the wires without melting the insulation. The only thing I noticed was I had to hold the iron in place just slightly longer. Once I'd wired the dynamo, it was time to upend the baseboard, and here I've used a length of duct tape or gaffer tape to make sure that the wires are protected. I've ordered some rubber mounting feet for this steam plant and they should arrive today. When I get them, I will fit them. These are the connectors that I'm going to use. The main reason for using these is they can just be plugged together and unplugged with ease. Also, you cannot reverse the polarity. One of the sockets is square, but the other one is round. Soldering these connectors was quite a fiddly job and I did find it very difficult to video. I'll show that in the next episode because that's it for this one. Stay safe, stay healthy, thanks for watching and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.